dreary building. Nobody, Marley's ghost. Scrooge lived in a gloomy suite of rooms in an old and dreary building. Nobody lived there but Scrooge. The other rooms had all been rented out as offices. Now there was nothing unusual about the knocker on the door except that it was very large. Let any man explain to me, if he can, how this happened. Scrooge, putting his key in the lock of the door, saw in the knocker, not a knocker, but Marley's face. Marley's face. It was not angry or frightening. It looked at Scrooge as Marley used to look, with ghostly glasses turned up on its ghostly forehead. As Scrooge stared at it, it became a knocker again. To say that he was not startled would be untrue, but Scrooge put his hand on the key, turned it, and walked in. He did pause before he shut the door. He did look behind it first, as if he half expected to see Marley's pigtails sticking out into the hall. But there was nothing on the back of the door, so he closed it with a bang. Scrooge climbed the dark stairs without a candle. Darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it. But before he closed the door, he walked through his rooms to see that all was as it should be. Nobody under the table, nobody under the sofa. He made a small fire and checked again. Nobody under the bed, nobody in the closet. Quite satisfied, he closed the door and locked himself in, thus safe against surprise. Scrooge took off his tie. Then he put on his robe, slippers, and nightcap, and sat down before the fire. It was a very low fire indeed. Scrooge had to sit close to it before he could feel any warmth. Suddenly, he heard a clanking noise deep down below. It sounded as if someone were dragging a heavy chain along the floor of the rooms below. The noise became louder and then seemed to come up the stairs, straight towards his rooms. Scrooge's color changed when the noise came through the heavy door and passed before his eyes. As it stopped at the hearth, the fire leaped up, as if to say, "Marley's ghost." The same face, the very same. Marley in his pigtail and his usual vest, tights, and boots. The chain he drew behind him was long, winding about him like a tail. It was made of cash boxes, keys, padlocks, ledgers, deeds, and heavy steel purses. Yet Marley's own body was transparent. Looking through his partner's vest, Scrooge could see the two back buttons on his coat. Cold as ever, Scrooge said, "What do you want with me?" "Much." It was Marley's own voice. "Who are you?" "Ask me who I was." "Who were you then?" said Scrooge. "In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley." "Why are you here?" "It is required of every man that the spirit within him should walk among his fellow men. If that spirit does not do so in life, it must do so after death. It is doomed to wander through the world. It must witness what it cannot share now, but might have shared while on earth." The ghost raised a frightful cry and shook its chain. "You are chained. Tell me why." "I wear the chain I forged in life," replied the ghost. "I made it link by link and yard by yard. I made it of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it. Is the pattern of this chain strange to you?" Scrooge shrank back in his chair. "Do you know the weight and length of the heavy chain you bear yourself?" 7 Christmas Eves ago, it was as heavy and as long as this. You have worked on it since. Yes, yours is a heavy chain. You have worked on it since. Yes, yours is a heavy chain. Tell me more. Comfort me, Jacob." "I have no comfort to give," the ghost said. "In life, my spirit never went beyond our counting house. Now I cannot linger anywhere. Weary journeys lie before me." "You must be very slow, Jacob." "Slow?" the ghost repeated. 7 years and traveling all the time. "The whole time," cried the ghost in a dismal voice. No rest, no peace. But you were always a good man of business, Jacob, said Scrooge. Business, cried the ghost. Humankind was my business. The common good was my business. Charity, mercy, and kindness were all my business. My trade was but a drop of water in the ocean of my business. At this time of year I suffer most. Why did I walk through crowds of fellow beings with my eyes turned down? Why only you can see me now, I do not know. I have sat invisible beside you many and many a day. It was not a happy thought. Scrooge shivered and wiped his brow. I am here tonight to warn you. You may yet have a chance and a hope of escaping my fate. A chance and a hope that I got for you, Ebenezer. You were always a good friend to me, said Scrooge. Thank you. You will be haunted by 3 spirits. Without their visits, you cannot hope to avoid the path I walk. Expect the first one tomorrow when the clock strikes 1. Expect the second one on the next night at the same hour. The third will come on the 3rd night. Look to see me no more. Remember what has passed between us. With that, the ghost walked backward from Scrooge. With each step it took, the window raised itself a little. When the ghost reached it, it was wide open. In a moment, the ghost floated out into the dark night. Scrooge closed the window and checked the door. It was locked, as he had locked it with his own hands. He tried to say humbug, but stopped at the first syllable. Then, being much in need of rest, he went directly to bed and fell asleep. Scrooge lived in a gloomy suite of rooms in an old and dreary building. Nobody lived there but Scrooge. The other rooms had all been rented out as offices. Now there was nothing unusual about the knocker on the door except that it was very large. Let any man explain to me, if he can, how this happened. Scrooge, putting his key in the lock of the door, saw in the knocker, not a knocker, but Marley's face. Marley's face. It was not angry or frightening. It looked at Scrooge as Marley used to look, with ghostly glasses turned up on its ghostly forehead. As Scrooge stared at it, it became a knocker again. To say that he was not startled would be untrue, but Scrooge put his hand on the key, turned it, and walked in. He did pause before he shut the door. He did look behind it first, as if he half expected to see Marley's pigtail sticking out into the hall. But there was nothing on the back of the door, so he closed it with a bang. Scrooge climbed the dark stairs without a candle. Darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it. But before he closed the door, he walked through his rooms to see that all was as it should be. Nobody under the table, nobody under the sofa. He made a small fire and checked again. Nobody under the bed, nobody in the closet. Quite satisfied, he closed the door and locked himself in, thus safe against surprise. Scrooge took off his tie. Then he put on his robe, slippers, and nightcap, and sat down before the fire. It was a very low fire indeed. Scrooge had to sit close to it before he could feel any warmth. Suddenly, he heard a clanking noise deep down below. It sounded as if someone were dragging a heavy chain along the floor of the rooms below. The noise became louder and then seemed to come up the stairs, straight towards his rooms. Scrooge's color changed when the noise came through the heavy door and passed before his eyes. As it stopped at the hearth, the fire leaped up, as if to say, Marley's ghost. The same face, the very same. Marley in his pigtail and his usual vest, tights, and boots. The chain he drew behind him was long, winding about him like a tail. It was made of cash boxes, keys, padlocks, ledgers, deeds, and heavy steel purses. Yet Marley's own body was transparent. Looking through his partner's vest, Scrooge could see the 2 back buttons on his coat. Cold as ever, Scrooge said, "What do you want with me?" "Much." It was Marley's own voice. Who are you? Ask me who I was. Who were you then? Said Scrooge. In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley. Why are you here? It is required of every man that the spirit within him should walk among his fellow men. If that spirit does not do so in life, it must do so after death. It is doomed to wander through the world. It must witness what it cannot share now, but might have shared while on earth. The ghost raised a frightful cry and shook its chain. You are chained. Tell me what, Jacob Marley. Why are you here? It is required of every man that the spirit within him should walk among his fellow men. If that spirit does not do so in life, it must do so after death. It is doomed to wander through the world. It must witness what it cannot share now, but might have shared while on earth. The ghost raised a frightful cry and shook its chain. You are chained. Tell me why. I wear the chain I forged in life, replied the ghost. I made it link by link and yard by yard. I made it of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it. Is the pattern of this chain strange to you? Scrooge shrank back in his chair. Do you know the weight and length of the heavy chain you bear yourself? 7 Christmas Eves ago, it was as heavy and as long as this. You have worked on it since. Yes, yours is a... Okay, so let me explain my sketch notes. Alright, so this is for chapter 3 of A Christmas Carol. It's called Marley's Ghost. Okay, and this picture represents the knocker, or the handle on the door. Alright, and when Scrooge sees Marley's face in there, he's like, uh-oh, because the knocker made him nervous because he was scared. Alright, and you'll notice that I use color throughout to add emphasis for things that I think are important as I'm watching this. So Scrooge goes upstairs to his room, right? And he's sitting there warming himself by the fire, and to me, that felt like he was trying not to think about it. Almost like I'm imagining all this, right? But it turns out he wasn't imagining all this, because then Jacob Marley's ghost shows up, and that's my representation. And this is the chain. You'll notice that I'm labeling my pictures as I go, because someone looking at this, if I had just left the pictures, they would never understand what I was trying to say. I put a quote in here that I thought was important. I wear the chain I forged in life, right? That's what Marley says. And then he also tells him, yours is a heavy chain. And that makes me think that Scrooge's chain is longer than Marley's, because he's been working on it for the 7 years that Jacob Marley has been dead. Okay? So that means that Scrooge hasn't been a nice person. So while Marley's chain stopped building, so let me write that down. So chain stopped building when Marley died. So Marley's chain stopped building when Marley died. Scrooge has been still building that by the mean things and the unkindness that he's shown. So Marley is angry with himself for being unkind to others, and he's trying to tell Scrooge, you know, I worked to get you another chance, right? Right? So you're going to be visited by 3 ghosts, and they're going to come at the same time. We know that this is in the early morning from the story. So 1 a.m. on the first ghost, the next 1 a.m. is going to be the second ghost, and the next 1 a.m. is going to be the third ghost. And I wrote, the ghosts are coming. All right? And then I wrote that Jacob Marley was doomed not to rest after death because of how he lived his life. And my question for this is Scrooge also doomed? All right, and that's the lasting question that I gathered from this part of the story.
So I did this while I was listening to the story, and some of you do have access to audio versions, and you'll notice that I rewound and I listened to the story more than once to go back and make sure I added all the details that I feel I needed. One thing that I might want to go back to is vocabulary. You can add vocabulary to this, but I'm hoping that this gives you a better impression of what you can expect, or what I'm expecting to see when you guys are doing your sketch notes. Do your sketch notes have to look exactly like mine? No, they don't. But they should give me lots of information, and they should help me to understand what's happening in the story. That's where my arrows are coming from, and the main things that I want to take away from what I read or what I listened to. So I hope this helps you too.